this is in the garden, and preliminary to the rendering of the first washes will be a very careful sketch. In this case, we have a lovely fountain, we have wonderful flowers, and we have the anticipation of water flowing and creating a beautiful pool and a pond below. What I've done to begin with is to make a careful sketch and then to use a frisket. The frisket is a resist. It's like a rubber cement, but it is specially created and manufactured to give an easy artistic way to place a resist against the first washes. And I'm using a little stick because I don't want to ruin a lovely brush. Oftentimes brushes can be used to do this. The flowers are delicate and wonderful, and they need to be their own precise color. And for this reason, and not too often, will I use a frisket to resist the washes that will come later. To begin with, I've started a drawing, and I'm using some watercolor pencils because there is a section here of a golden color, and the watercolor pencil has exactly that right color. And when you use the pencil in, and this is again underneath, these are all preliminary underneath things that you do before the wash, it will become watercolor. And I've also put some resist above it, so it gives a feeling of the exact patina that has been actually created over a period of time on this fountain. The fountain is very old, and the patina is very wonderful. That's what has actually attracted people to this place. It's a lovely and quiet and peaceful spot to rest and just to enjoy and reflect. Watercolor has the essence of that quality of rest and enjoyment, and delicacy can be created this way. All of this again is underpainting, and I'm going to be very sensitive to lost and found edge, which is negative space in behind the positive, and I can actually wet the pencil and do it this way too. It's kind of fun. You can get into the crevices, into the precise areas. Now, I'm going to leave that for the moment, and I'm going to do a single wash over the background here, in behind this. Usually I will start the full wash, but I want today just to do this part of it because this is where the frisket is. Now that the frisket is dry, I am going to wet the entire paper, and I have a broad aquarelle brush. I also sometimes use a hockey brush, which spreads the water much faster. But I'm only going to be doing half of the painting today because I want to show the demonstration of the second wash very carefully tomorrow. Now, because I've already put a frisket, I'm able to go right over the frisket, and it doesn't disturb it because it is like a rubber cement, and it stays right on the paper. Now, this has already been done, so I want to be careful of not re-wetting it, but I am going to be working in there, and this is going to be a lost and found edge, so I want to kind of go around this fountain, still wanting to do the fountain with the underpainting of the color pencils. So I'm beginning to see this already. I'm very excited about this picture. It's such a beautiful spot, so tranquil and so pretty. Now, these rocks were done with the same kind of pencil. When you touch it, it turns to paint. Isn't that neat? I just absolutely get so excited about the various kinds of materials you can use. Now, I'm going to leave a little bit of white and the dark and the gray. The rocks are gray in there. All of this will be the water, and it will be the brown and the gray rocks. Again, being a watercolor, you use plenty of water. And I'm going to go lost and found edge behind this fountain, and I will paint the right hand side and do the left hand side tomorrow. Now looking at the subject a little bit more carefully, you can see the darker greens and you can see the wonderful flowers and the cascading movement and the very gentle lines that create the circular motif. It's quite lovely. So I want to get into that flow. The first washes begin on a wet surface, wet into wet, and we're doing warm underpainting, and I'm doing lost and found edge, and the sunlight this corner, and dropping down, pale. You can always make a watercolor darker. It's very, very hard to go back to the whites. If you lose the whites, you literally lose the sparkle and the vibrancy that I'm going to splatter you. When I paint, I usually shake my brush out to get down to the absolute perfect spot. All right, I'm going to do lost and found edges around these rocks that are already created, and you can see the contrast, the vibrancy, and again I'm going to concentrate on one side today. And I have picked up a second aquarelle brush to do the cools. These brushes are wonderful, and I'm going to bring in a lost and found edge here and here. And this is the pool. When you do vertical strokes and then horizontal strokes, you create a feeling of reflection, and this base is going to be partially under the water. And the little flowers and the vines are going to cascade in front. But first I must put the base, which is the pond, which is underneath. Fortunately, I've seen many ponds because the water here, unfortunately, is not flowing, so I'm going to make it flow. The artist has the wonderful opportunity to create flowing water, transplant trees, bring in flowers from 1,000 miles away, because the flowers I'm going to put in here are actually in my home in Idaho. And we have a fountain there, which is lovely. It doesn't flow either. Fountains ought to flow. So you can begin to see the way in which watercolor will drop a color. You see how it works? If it's wet into wet, it just flows right down and it creates wonderful, happy accidents that we don't even know what it's going to be like. All right. So I'm rather satisfied with that part. And now I'm going to go into a smaller brush, and I'm going to mix these two colors, the yellow and this cerulean and cobalt turquoise, which is a new color for me. And I'm going to begin the flowing of the little branches that are underneath. This will be the underpainting to the flowers that will actually be on top. And you can see what's happened with this frisket. It's a wonderful thing, because I don't have to worry. I can go back in and put the bright flowers. They're already prepared. Now we're working under a very bright sun this morning, and unfortunately that is going to dry the paper out very quickly, and so I'm going to have to re-wet this and back into this and let it run some more. And I'm concentrating on just one section of the painting. Normally I would do warm all the way through and finish the whole thing at one time. Alright. The aquarelle brush is my absolute favorite, and it comes in several sizes. So I might move to the smaller size. This is the 1/4 inch. These brushes are, believe it or not, 30 years, 40 years old. They last forever. They're made Kolinsky sable. They're beautiful brushes. These are a little newer. They're about 20 years old, and as you paint, the brushes actually are broken at the very tip, because all of these are high quality Kolinsky sable brushes. These are a little bit newer, but the older ones, believe it or not, are better than the newer ones. And then this is a round, and it's also a beautiful brush. I use it a lot for ocean and large areas. I probably will use it more tomorrow than right now. I'm going to leave it aside. The first time on the passes, you have a slight bit of wet into wet in the running of the color. The second passes that are done will bring a little bit more intensity. So we have first wash, second wash, and third wash, and that's the way an artist will plan. So now I will come into a little bit more of intensity, same colors, but less water, and it will begin to deepen and darken and make the second value stand out. I'm using the same colors, actually cobalt blue and a little bit of Prussian that will darken it. There's many different wonderful blues and greens, and this picture of course calls for that. And the yellow is the warm, so I'm using yellow ochre, I'm using cobalt, Prussian, cerulean, and I'm using a smaller aquarelle and a small round, and I'm just using the freedom of movement to create the second value and the same subject. Of course, I'm concentrating on this one section of the painting, and then when I will remove the frisket, and it's possible that this is dry enough to remove a frisket to show you what happens when you pull the rubber cement off. It leaves a white floral, and I can show this to you and show you what I'm going to do in this area. Again, I don't use frisket very often, but this is just, it just calls for it. And it's just like a piece of rubber, it pulls right off. And it doesn't damage the surface of the paper. Some people do use rubber cement, but I think that's a foreign material that's not made for watercolor. It's very important to use quality materials. And that's the other part. I use Western and quality watercolors, and altogether different than a cheaper student grade. It's all right to use student grades if you really need to. All right, now the next thing is to really take advantage of the fact that these wonderful spots are prepared for you, and I'm going to go to pure alizarin and see if I can catch a clean spot. Yeah, that's perfect. And so now, for this picture will call for it, I'm going to put in the flowers that I would never have been able to do had I not held it out with a frisket. And here's a frisket that's over here, coming off again. When the light's in just the right, line, you can see the rubber cement. There's another little piece there. And there's more here. you actually are painting with the frisket to make the flower. And you can see that this is taking some time. So in a group demonstration, such as we're planning, I would not be able to do this in a hurry. This is intentional and it takes time. And we want it to be nice. A good example. So this is alizarin crimson. It has a more of a pink tone. I think they call it something else besides alizarin. But for all intents and purposes, it is alizarin. Oh, there's more frisket down here. There we go. Aren't those colors wonderful together? I just really enjoy them. And they were in the Monet garden that I saw a year ago. And I was just enchanted by the richness and the beauty. The reds and the yellows against the blues, the greens, the warms, the cools. Again, the red will pop forward and the blues are cool. And there's almost enough of this, but not quite. I will spend a little more time and create and develop without contriving it. And that's the other thing. Working on location, you don't have a contrived painting. This is actual, this is real, this is right here. All right. That's good. The techniques that I'm using is dry brush, where you take the heel of the brush and you create the texture that is so beautiful on this fountain. And I'm still looking at the fountain and noticing the texturing that is more towards this side. And then I take a little bit of water and bring down the shading and the shadowing from underneath here. And I'm using burnt sienna and Payne's Gray, and just dropping it down like that. And there are moments and places where I can add a touch of the brighter red, cadmium red, and that's what I'm going to do here, just on this section. And it adds that wonderful reddish tone. Cadmium red and burnt sienna. And scubbling or dry brush, use the heel of the brush without too much water will make this texture.